what is top of mind for Australians? Obviously, getting ready for retirement. It's got to be one of the top questions that advisors are asked. Rob Gilmour from Wealth Simplicity is joining me now with some thoughts. Rob, is that a fair statement? I mean, this is what everybody's trying to achieve, right?
Well, look, absolutely. I mean, the demographics in Australia are suggesting that as well. We've got an ageing population and there are many people contemplating retirement, and it does require some thinking up front. It's not a very straightforward process, particularly when it comes to managing assets and looking forward to what those needs might be.
Okay, so we start with how much money we think we're going to need to retire, or where's the starting point?
Yeah, I suppose simplistically, you've got to start with where things are currently at, and that will involve looking at your cash flow, what your current expenses are for your lifestyle, and presumably you might want to maintain that lifestyle in retirement, but those expenses will evolve as you lead up to that point. Kids might be leaving school, you might be through school fees, but that won't necessarily change straight away as you're trying to get them through, say, tertiary education and then staying at home a bit longer, but trying to get a good understanding of your cash flow and then looking at your assets and your investable assets and how that might come together in order to meet future passive income requirements, but also not taking your eyes off financial risks that might happen in the meantime. And that's where you look at contingencies like insurance and also estate planning as well.
And those are sort of all standalones that we could delve into. But when you're advising people, is the goal always to be debt-free when you get into retirement?
Look, that is a big part of it. You certainly don't want to be going into retirement with debt on your home, for example. And there are strategies to think about using superannuation that might accelerate the repayment of mortgage debt. Also, typically investment debt, it's not something you would generally go into retirement with. It will depend on how much your overall asset pool is, but the shift really becomes to how you're going to generate income. And servicing debt is obviously going to go against that.
Yeah, okay. And so that's the thing. I was speaking with a guest last week that was talking about FORO. So fear of running out in retirement is what it's called. So talking about these ways to get this income coming through, is that purely through financial products like annuities or dividends? Like how do you think about that asset mix?
Yeah, I mean, taking a step back in terms of planning for retirement, what we do see is a lot of clients have had assets that have been great in the accumulation phase, and a good example of that is residential property. They might have had a couple of residential properties going for many years. There's a lot of capital gains locked up, and then you turn it on its head and think about, well, is residential property a great retirement asset? And typically the yields are very low and there's a lot of ongoing maintenance and costs. So one of the things we do spend a bit of time about is sort of thinking about how you transition from assets that are more growth orientated to income orientated. And that's where superannuation definitely does come into play, and the variety of asset exposures you can obtain through, say, a self-managed super fund, but also just, put simplistically, even your public offer funds like the industry funds as well.
Okay, and so you want to have a mix. You can still have a bit of risk in your portfolio, can't you, when you're retired, but you want to have a defensive overlay?
Managing risk is really important, particularly as you sort of get up to that point where you are going to draw on your retirement savings. You don't want to be drawing on your retirement savings at the worst possible time when there is a downturn in the market. But equally, you've got to think that these assets are going to last for 30 years. So if you take too much of a defensive posture, that's going to work against you in the long term. So it is definitely trying to find the balance, and that will certainly depend on your tolerance for risk, but also your capacity for risk as well.
And so we're thinking 30 years for retirement these days, are we?
Well, we're all living longer, right? So, you look at the average age that men and women are living to these days, and when you're contemplating these decisions when someone's in their 50s, it's 30 years or potentially even longer.
Yeah, and so do you even have the sort of aged care conversation with clients, or are people still very much focused on being in their homes or downsizing? Because there is sort of a early phase of retirement, one would think, and then perhaps a later phase of retirement as well.
Look, absolutely. Part of the mystery in terms of unpacking all these things is trying to project a bit of a path and what that might look like, and trying to get a view in terms of obviously having passive income that can manage those expectations in terms of costs of living, through the earlier years in retirement, you're typically going to spend more. You're going to want to enjoy your retirement.
Travel, all the rest of it.
Absolutely. So those conversations are really important. Downsizing the home can definitely be a big part of that. And just giving people the comfort that, well, you can spend a certain level of amount in your early years in retirement and feel comfortable knowing that you also have those assets in the later years to think about, okay, the transition to aged care, maintaining income, but also how you transfer wealth to the next generation.